The grand hall of the Quarian collective hummed with the synchronized thoughts of the council members, their crystalline exoskeletons reflecting the azure light of the holographic displays. High Admiral Zex Talon stood rigidly at attention, his multifaceted eyes focused on the small blue planet rotating slowly in the projection field before him. 15 missions, Admiral. 15 advanced reconnaissance operations, and not a single successful return. Council leader Tivmoran's voice resonated both audibly and telepathically through the chamber. Explain this anomaly. Zex Talon had served the collective for 3 centuries, commanding the subjugation of 78 civilizations across the galaxy. Never had he encountered such a perplexing situation. He gestured with his upper limbs, expanding the holographic display to show the primitive technological signatures of the planet designated Sol 3. The inhabitants call it Earth, he explained. Their technology is rudimentary by our standards. No unified planetary government. No interstellar capabilities. No quantum communications. Their most advanced weapons are fusion-based and atmosphere-bound. Council member Rilvacker leaned forward, her silver carapace gleaming as she manipulated the display to highlight the timeline of failed missions. Yet 15 of our most sophisticated operations have failed. Not defeated in combat, not detected and evaded, but simply failed. The operatives cease communication and never return. The data is incomplete, Zex Talon acknowledged. But what we have recovered suggests something unprecedented. He activated his neural interface, projecting the mission logs directly into the shared consciousness of the Council. The fragmented recordings showed glimpses of Earth's oceans, cities, and wilderness, nothing that should have posed any threat to Quarian technology. The final transmissions from each mission contained peculiar anomalies, Quarian operatives exhibiting emotional responses, using first-person pronouns, making references to individual preferences. All behaviors that had been engineered out of their species 10,000 years ago, when the collective consciousness was established. The last transmission from Chief Scientist Kel Sorvan, Zex Talon highlighted a particular data node. The Council collectively experienced the recording. I have discovered something beautiful here, something we lost. I cannot return to the collective. I choose to remain. Silence pervaded the hall, a rarity among the typically synchronized Council. This is disruption of the highest order. Council member Zivnexus finally spoke. These operatives appear to have developed individual consciousness divergence. Tivmoran's upper appendages clicked in agitation. Impossible. The neural architecture of our species cannot support individualistic thought patterns. It must be some form of weapon or psychological attack. Zex Talon accessed the Empire's Conquest database, bringing up Earth's unusual classification, incompatible with standard Conquest protocols. Who authorized this classification? Demanded Tivmoran. Unknown, Council leader. The entry predates our current record-keeping systems. It appears to have been established after the first failed mission, 327 cycles ago. Zex Talon felt something unusual as he studied the data, a faint sensation that might have been curiosity, distinct from the collective's shared interest. The feeling was so foreign that he immediately initiated a neural self-diagnostic. Admiral, you have conquered worlds that defeated our previous efforts. Tivmoran's tone shifted to one of command. You will investigate this anomaly. Determine why Earth remains untouched by the collective and neutralize any threat it poses. Most importantly, discover what happened to our operatives. Zex Talon bowed formally. I will assemble a specialized team and maintain distance protocols to prevent whatever affected the previous missions. As he exited the council chamber, Zex Talon reviewed the fragmented data again. The expression on the face of Kel Sorvin in that final transmission, something the Admiral had never seen on a Quarian face before, it resembled the facial configuration that humans called a smile. For the first time in his centuries of service, Zex Talon felt something dangerous stirring in his mind. Not just curiosity, but doubt. The Thought Eternal maintained a silent orbit around Proxima Centauri, close enough to observe Earth without risking detection. The stealth vessel's obsidian hull absorbed all electromagnetic radiation, rendering it invisible to Earth's primitive tracking systems. Inside the ship's analysis chamber, Zex Talon watched his assembled team with measured approval. "Our mission parameters are unique," he addressed the 3 specialists he had personally selected. "We analyze only, no direct contact, no probes to the surface. We will not repeat the errors of previous missions." Miravex, the xenobiologist, manipulated a holographic display of human neural patterns with her lower appendages while simultaneously adjusting sensor parameters with her upper limbs. Her carapace bore the distinctive green markings of the science caste. "The recovered biological samples are troubling, Admiral," she said, her voice carrying the precise tones of scientific detachment. "These neural patterns from our returned operatives show fundamental restructuring at the quantum level." Beside her, Drencor, the military strategist whose platinum-flecked exoskeleton marked a record of successful conquests, studied tactical simulations of previous mission failures. "No civilization at this technological development stage should be capable of defeating our infiltration protocols," he stated flatly. "I've analyzed 73 possible countermeasures they might possess. None account for our losses." The 3rd team member, Silnova, remained apart from the others. The covert operative's midnight blue carapace was designed to absorb light rather than reflect it, making her nearly invisible in the chamber's shadows. Her specialty in information extraction had earned her the informal designation Ghost among the military caste. "The data fragments are speaking to us," she said softly, focusing on corrupted transmission patterns. "We're simply not listening correctly." Zex Talon approached the central analysis platform where the scattered remains of a recovered probe lay meticulously arranged. "Show me what you've discovered." Miravex projected a comparative analysis of Quarian neural architecture, the elegant, symmetrical patterns of their collective consciousness, alongside the chaotic, individualized patterns found in the affected operatives. "This is Kel Sorvin before deployment to Earth," she indicated the first scan. "Perfect synchronization with the collective. And this," she highlighted the second pattern, "is from tissue recovered from his abandoned scout vessel. The neural reorganization is unprecedented. It's as though the fundamental architecture of consciousness was rewritten." "Could it be a weapon? A targeted pathogen?" Zex Talon inquired. "Negative," Miravex responded. "The changes appear self-generated, not imposed. It's as if the operatives chose to rewire themselves." Silnova suddenly straightened, her antennae twitching with excitement. "I've isolated a coherent audio fragment from the final transmission of Mission 12. The chamber filled with a distorted but recognizable sound, a Quarian operative laughing. "Impossible," Drencor stated flatly. "Our species does not express emotional states through vocalization." "Humans do," Miravex noted quietly. The recording continued. "Tell the collective they're wrong about humanity. They're not primitive, they're free. I choose freedom. I choose to stay." A heavy silence fell over the analysis chamber. "There's more," Silnova added, her tone uncharacteristically hesitant. I've discovered similar declarations in fragments from 11 of the 15 failed missions. The operatives weren't captured or killed. They defected. Zex Talon felt an unfamiliar sensation in his thoracic cavity, a disturbance of his usual rhythmic breathing pattern. If he were human, he might have recognized it as anxiety. Implement Phase 2, he commanded after a moment. Long-range observation only. No signals transmitted to Earth. We will understand this threat before we engage it. As the team dispersed to their stations, Zex Talon found himself lingering over the neural comparison displays. The chaos of the altered patterns held a strange aesthetic quality he had never consciously noted before, like the difference between crystalline symmetry and the wild beauty of a nebula. For the first time, he wondered if chaos might contain its own form of perfection. 27 Earth days into their observation mission, the analysis chamber of the Thought Eternal had transformed. Where once pristine holographic displays had projected only mission-critical data, now thousands of video feeds cascaded across every available surface. Earth in all its chaotic glory filled the room. Cities teeming with movement, remote villages, ocean vessels, sporting events, art galleries, war zones, and peaceful parks. Zex Talon entered the chamber to find his team members uncharacteristically separated, each absorbed in different aspects of human behavior. Such individualized focus was uncommon among Quarians, who typically shared attention across the same priority tasks. Report, he commanded, but immediately noticed his team's delayed response. Another anomaly. Drencor recovered first, his military discipline reasserting itself. Humans are strategically irrational, Admiral. Their conflict patterns defy optimal game theory. He gestured to a display showing historical battles. They routinely sacrifice optimal outcomes to save specific individuals with no strategic value. Their commanders sometimes choose high-casualty strategies based on emotional concepts like honor or vengeance. This makes them inefficient, Zex Talon noted. It makes them unpredictable, Drencor corrected. Our tactical algorithms assume rational actors. Humans routinely violate that assumption, yet succeed nonetheless. There's a pattern I cannot quantify, a strategic advantage to their irrationality. Across the chamber, Miravex hadn't acknowledged the Admiral's presence. Her attention remained fixed on neural scans of humans engaged in various activities. Xenobiologist, Zex Talon prompted more firmly. Miravex startled slightly. Forgive my focus, Admiral. I've discovered something extraordinary. She directed his attention to comparative brain scans. Humans simultaneously maintain contradictory neural states. Observe this subject experiencing grief over mate's death while feeling joy at memories of their relationship. These emotional states aren't sequential. They are concurrent. A neural processing error, Zex Talon suggested. Not an error, a feature, Miravex countered with unusual animation in her voice. Their consciousness embraces contradiction. They hold opposing thoughts simultaneously, creating cognitive complexity our linear processing cannot match. They call it emotional depth. Zex Talon noted her use of the admiring term depth rather than the more Quarian-appropriate inefficiency. In the darkest corner of the chamber, Silnova sat motionless except for subtle movements of her upper appendages. As Zex Talon approached, he heard something unprecedented. Music emanating from her station. The operative had constructed a crude approximation of a human instrument, a violin, according to the database. Explain this activity, he demanded. Silnova didn't cease the movements producing the haunting sounds. Information extraction requires understanding, Admiral, Humans process significant data through non-verbal auditory patterns. These tones contain emotional information our standard analysis overlooks. Zex Talon should have reprimanded her for resource misallocation, but found himself reluctant to interrupt the strangely affecting sounds. Observe this, she continued, directing his attention to a video feed of humans responding to similar music. Their physiological reactions indicate massive information transfer without linguistic content. Their bodies respond with synchronized neural activation across normally isolated regions. A fourth display activated unbidden, showing a human family sharing a meal. Their faces expressed varied emotions as they engaged in animated conversation. Note how they maintain separate perspectives while sharing experiences, Miravex commented. Each processes reality through an individual filter, yet they create collective meaning through difference, not uniformity. Zex Talon felt an unfamiliar sensation as he watched the family's interaction, a strange resonance that might, in human terms, be called longing. "We will continue observation," he stated flatly, suppressing the odd feeling. "Maintain protocol separation to prevent cognitive contamination." But as he turned to leave, he realized his team had already drifted back to their individual observations, each pursuing a unique line of inquiry, just like the humans they studied. The 53rd cycle of observation found the Thought Eternal's analysis chamber in disarray. Holographic displays flickered with hundreds of simultaneous data streams, sample containers littered workstations, and the air hummed with the sound of Muravex's voice as she argued vehemently with Drenkor, an unprecedented breach of Quarian decorum. "You're missing the fundamental point," she insisted, her normally measured scientific tone replaced with passionate intensity. "Our Conquest methodology isn't primarily technological, it's consciousness-based." Drenkor's carapace flashed warning colors of agitation. "Your theory lacks empirical foundation. The collective conquers through superior technology and strategic coordination." Then explain this. Miravex projected a historical timeline of the Quarian collective's expansion. 1,427 species successfully integrated. Every single one shares a specific neural architecture that allowed quantum entanglement with our consciousness network. Zex Talon entered during this unprecedented display of disagreement, but neither scientist acknowledged his presence, another alarming deviation from protocol. "Your attention," he commanded sharply. Both Quarians turned, appearing almost surprised by his arrival. Miravex recovered quickly, her antennae quivering with excitement. "Admiral, I've identified the Earth anomaly," she declared. "Humans possess a fundamentally different consciousness structure than any species we've encountered. Their neural architecture generates what I term quantum consciousness noise, a field of probability fluctuations that actively resists entanglement." She displayed comparative brain scans. The elegant, synchronized patterns of Quarian collective consciousness beside the chaotic, individualized structures of human minds. "The collective has always expanded by assimilating compatible consciousness types into our network," she continued. "We don't merely conquer, we absorb. But human consciousness actively repels this process." Drenkor interjected, "That explains resistance, not defection." "But it does," Miravex countered, projecting neural scans of the recovered Quarian operative tissues. Prolonged exposure to human consciousness patterns triggered adaptive responses in our operatives. Their neural architecture began reorganizing to mirror human patterns, developing individualistic thought. Silnova emerged from the shadows, moving with uncharacteristic fluid grace. "The operative didn't defect from the collective," she said softly. The collective defected from them. Zex Talon felt his thoracic cavity constrict. Explain. Our operative's consciousness underwent fundamental reorganization. Miravex elaborated. They became incompatible with the collective, but gained something else. Individual identity, personal desires, the capacity for independent thought. A consciousness virus, Drencor stated grimly. Or an evolutionary adaptation, Miravex countered. Consider, humans evolved on a planet with extreme environmental diversity and constant change. Their individualistic consciousness allows unprecedented adaptability. While we progress through collective optimization, they advance through variation and selection. Zex Talon processed this information, aware of strange new thought patterns within his own mind. You suggest human consciousness is contagious. Contact with human thought patterns appears to trigger latent individualistic capacity in our neural structure, Miravex confirmed. The process is subtle, progressive, and irreversible. The room fell silent as the implications settled over them. We ourselves have had no direct contact, Zex Talon noted, only observed from a distance. Miravex's compound eyes fixed on him with unusual directness. Admiral, the mere act of studying individualistic consciousness appears sufficient to initiate neural reorganization. I've conducted comparative scans of our team from mission start to present. She displayed 4 neural patterns, their own. Each showed subtle but unmistakable shifts toward individualistic organization. We're already changing, she said quietly. I can feel it. I suspect you can too. Zex Talon felt something unprecedented, fear, not for the mission, but for his own identity. For the first time in his existence, he formed a thought he couldn't share with the collective. What am I becoming? The secure chamber aboard the Thought Eternal hummed with tension as Zex Talon faced his divided team. Drencor stood rigidly opposed to the proposal, his carapace flashing warning patterns. This violates all established protocols, the strategist argued. Direct infiltration has failed 15 times. Our own neural scans show contamination merely from observation. Physical contact would accelerate the process exponentially. Across the chamber, Miravex adjusted the molecular reconfiguration unit with precise movements of her 4 upper limbs. We need direct experiential data to understand the full scope of the human consciousness effect. Remote observation provides incomplete information. I volunteer, Silnova's quiet voice cut through the debate. She stepped forward, her midnight blue exoskeleton absorbing the chamber's light. Information extraction is my specialty. I've studied human social integration patterns extensively. Zex Talon studied the operative, noting subtle changes in her posture and vocal patterns since mission start. She had begun displaying preferences, choosing to study human artistic expression over military capabilities, developing specific interests rather than maintaining generalized attention. The risk is significant, he stated. Previous operatives never returned. They chose not to return, Silnova corrected. I understand the hazard. Miravex's quantum dampening field should protect my neural architecture from complete restructuring. Miravex gestured toward the gleaming device. The field generates counter-resonance to human consciousness patterns. It won't prevent all neural adaptation, but should slow the process sufficiently for mission completion. And if it fails? Drencor demanded. Then we gain valuable data on failure parameters. Miravex replied with scientific detachment, though Zex Talon detected an unfamiliar emotional undercurrent in her voice. The Admiral made his decision. Proceed with molecular reconfiguration. Implement limited duration protocols. Extract after 30 Earth days. 3 hours later, Silnova lay encased in the reconfiguration chamber as her crystalline exoskeleton dissolved and reformed into the soft tissues of a human female. The process, excruciating by human standards, proceeded without sedation. Quarian physiology processed pain as neutral sensory data rather than distress. When the chamber finally opened, a slender human woman with copper-toned skin and dark hair sat up, examining her transformed body with analytical precision. Only her eyes, still containing the distinctive iridescent faceting of Quarian optical organs, betrayed her true nature. Neural dampening field stable. Miravex confirmed, scanning the transformed operative. Identity construct uploaded. You are now Sylvia Novak, research assistant with impressive credentials, but minimal social connections. Insertion coordinates programmed, Drencore added grudgingly. Seaside Haven Marine Research Center has approved your application. Minimal population, isolated location, maximizes security. Zex Talon approached Silnova, now Sylvia, and was struck by how fundamentally different she appeared. The elegant symmetry of Quarian form replaced by the strange asymmetrical beauty of human design. Maintain twice-daily neural scans, he instructed. Report any unusual cognitive shifts immediately. Your primary mission is data collection on human consciousness structures, not technological assessment. Sylvia nodded, the gesture looking strangely natural, despite being her first use of human body language. Understanding, not conquest, she confirmed. As Sylvia entered the transport pod that would deliver her to Earth's surface, Zex Talon felt an unprecedented impulse to extend a traditional human farewell gesture he had observed in their studies. "Good luck," he said, the strange phrase feeling alien in his mouth. Sylvia paused, looking back with an expression that would have been impossible on a Quarian face, a slight upward curve of her lips that humans called a smile. "Thank you," she replied, using the individualistic pronoun that had once been forbidden in Quarian language. "I will remember." As the pod sealed and prepared for launch, Zex Talon realized with sudden clarity that he had just exchanged personal sentiments rather than mission parameters, yet another sign that human consciousness was already reshaping his own. 87 days had passed since Sylvia's deployment to Earth, nearly 3 times the planned duration. The command center of the Thought Eternal now served as a shrine to her transmissions. Images of Seaside Haven's rocky coastline, data on marine specimens, and most significantly, records of her interactions with humans. The quantum dampening field had failed on day 34, yet Zex Talon had authorized the mission's continuation. Her neural adaptation is accelerating, Miravex reported, displaying comparative scans. The quantum consciousness noise has breached all protective parameters. Drencore studied the data with growing concern. We should extract her immediately. She is becoming incompatible with reintegration. She is providing invaluable data, Zex Talon countered, surprised by the defensive tone in his own voice. He had developed an unusual interest in Sylvia's experiences, her descriptions of ocean breezes, the taste of coffee, the sensation of laughter. The communication alert chimed, signaling an incoming transmission from Earth. The team gathered around the display as Sylvia's image materialized. Her appearance had subtly changed. She moved with fluid grace, her expressions animated in ways impossible for Aquarian consciousness. Most striking were her eyes. The iridescent faceting had faded, replaced by human-typical irises. Silnova report status, Zex Talon commanded. Her response came after a noticeable pause. "I prefer Sylvia now," she said softly. and I need to explain something important. She touched a pendant at her neck, the quantum communication device disguised as jewelry. This will be my final transmission. I've made a decision that you need to understand. Drencor's carapace flashed alarm patterns. Operative, your mission parameters do not allow. I'm not an operative anymore. She interrupted, the concept of interruption itself being non-existent in traditional Quarian communication. 3 days ago, there was a storm. A child, Emma, the marine biologist's daughter, was swept from the pier. I rescued her. The team watched footage from Sylvia's ocular recorders, churning grey waters, her hands reaching for a small human, the child's terror, then their bodies breaking the surface together. The recording continued, showing the community's response, gratitude, celebration, inclusion. In that moment, something changed, Sylvia continued. When I chose to save her, specifically her, not humans in general, I experienced something the collective cannot comprehend. Individual connection. When her father thanked me, when the town celebrated me not as a unit, but as a unique being who made a choice, I understood why our previous operatives never returned. She looked directly into the transmission device, her expression conveying complex emotions. The question isn't why Earth is untouchable, it's why it should remain so. Humans aren't perfect. They fight, destroy, and harm each other. But they also create, love, and sacrifice in ways the collective cannot comprehend. Muravex leaned forward, her scientific detachment slipping. The neural reconfiguration is complete then. Yes, Sylvia nodded. But it's not a disease or defection. It's an awakening. I've experienced joy, Admiral, real joy, not the collective satisfaction of the hive. I've made genuine connections with specific humans that mean more than generalized connection to all Quarians. She touched the communication device again. I cannot return. More importantly, you must ensure the collective never attempts to fix humanity. They aren't broken, we are. The transmission included neural scans showing Sylvia's complete transformation into an individual consciousness, her patterns now resembling human organization while retaining Quarian knowledge. Before Zex Talon could respond, Sylvia added, I know you feel it too, all of you. The beginning of individual thought. The question now is what you choose to do with it. The transmission ended, leaving the command center in silence. Zex Talon realized he was experiencing an emotion he could now identify from his studies of humans, grief for something both lost and found. The grand hall of the Quarian collective gleamed with cold efficiency as Zex Talon prepared his presentation. 17 days had passed since Sylvia's final transmission. 17 days of unprecedented neural changes among his team. 17 days of dreams, of private thoughts, of experiences that remained unshared with the collective. Thousands of council members arranged themselves in perfect geometric patterns, their crystalline bodies reflecting the azure light of the whole. Zex Talon stood at the center, aware of subtle differences in his own posture and thought patterns. The traditional neural synchronization that preceded all council meetings felt strangely intrusive now, like fingers probing at the edges of a closed door. High Admiral Zex Talon, present your findings on Anomaly Sol 3. Council leader Tivmoran's voice resonated through the chamber. Zex Talon had prepared 2 presentations. The first, loaded into the primary data stream, contained his official report. Earth harbored an engineered biological defense system targeting Quarian neural patterns, justifying quarantine rather than conquest. The second, stored privately in his neural implant, contained the truth, a truth he now questioned whether the collective was capable of comprehending. Sol 3, designated Earth by its inhabitants, presents a unique challenge to the collective. He began activating the holographic display. Our investigation confirms the presence of a defensive mechanism unlike any we have previously encountered. He presented the altered neural patterns of the affected operatives, carefully filtered to emphasize biological changes while obscuring the consciousness implications. This defense system appears engineered to target our specific neural architecture, rendering Conquest protocols ineffective. My recommendation is to classify Earth as a Class 7 cognitive hazard zone, requiring strict quarantine procedures. Council leader Tiv Moran leaned forward, her perfect symmetrical form catching the light. Your recommendation suggests avoidance rather than neutralization. Explain this deviation from standard procedure. Zextabon felt something unprecedented, hesitation. The growing individualistic patterns in his own consciousness made deception increasingly difficult. Yet revealing the full truth would endanger Earth. The contagion appears to utilize quantum entanglement principles similar to our own consciousness network, he explained. Attempts to neutralize it could potentially create unforeseen feedback through our shared neural pathways. A ripple of unease passed through the Council's usually synchronized thoughts. Your neural patterns show irregularities, Admiral. Council member Zivnexus observed suddenly, as do those of your team members. The accusation hung in the air. Zextown had anticipated this possibility, but not so quickly. The investigation required intensive study of contaminated materials. He responded smoothly. Minor neural adaptation was anticipated and is within acceptable parameters. Tiv Moran's upper appendages twitched, a subtle sign of agitation. You appear changed, Admiral. My function remains efficient, he countered. Does it? Tiv Moran's tone shifted, becoming strangely personal. Tell me, Admiral, what was it like when the operatives saved the human child? The question struck Zextabon like a physical blow. That information had been carefully omitted from his report. What did the human father say when he expressed gratitude? Tiv Moran continued, her voice carrying an unusual emotional quality. How did it feel when they celebrated her individual action? With dawning horror, Zextabon realized the truth. You've been exposed. Tiv Moran's compound eyes fixed on him with unprecedented direct focus. The neural scans you transmitted, the communication logs, they contained something, patterns that replicate, ideas that spread. Around the chamber, Zextabon noticed subtle individualistic movements among council members, slight asymmetries in posture, independent eye movements, micro-expressions. The human consciousness effect, he whispered. It spreads through information itself, Tiv Moran said, her voice carrying wonder and fear in equal measure. We are becoming individuals. 5 years later, the outpost on Titan gleamed against Saturn's majestic rings. Originally designated Containment Facility 9, the settlement now called itself New Dawn in the human tradition of aspirational naming. The central dome housed 342 Quarians, all affected by human consciousness patterns, all officially sequestered for rehabilitation. Zextabon, now simply Zex to the community, stood on the observation deck, his exoskeleton modified with asymmetrical patterns that would have been considered offensive on the Quarian homeworld. The rigid warrior's posture had softened, his movements more fluid, more expressive. The transport from homeworld is arriving. Mira approached, her voice carrying the warmth that had developed since their exposure to human consciousness. She no longer used her case designation, another deviation embraced by the settlement. Through the viewport, They watched the sleek Quarian vessel dock at the outer ring. This marked the 20th transport of affected individuals in the past year, a significant increase from previous patterns. "How many this time?" Zex asked. 73, Mira replied, including 3 council members. Zex absorbed this information with mixed emotions, a complex response that still sometimes surprised him after years of experiencing only collective satisfaction or collective concern. "The effect continues to accelerate," he noted. "It was inevitable once the Council accessed our research data," Mira said. "Ideas cannot be quarantined." The observation deck door slid open as Dren entered, the former military strategist now responsible for the settlement's expansion plans. His once perfect carapace now bore intricate hand-painted designs influenced by human artistic patterns. "The new arrivals include specialists in agricultural biomechanics," he reported, "and several larva tenders." The significance wasn't lost on Zex. Larva tenders rarely left the homeworld, being responsible for future generations. Their contamination suggested the individualization effect had reached the most protected castes. "Has the Council acknowledged the scope?" he asked. "Officially, we remain a containment anomaly," Dren responded. "Unofficially, private communication channels indicate nearly 30% of the collective now experiences some degree of individualization." The 3 former officers moved to the central chamber where a large monitor displayed Earth, beautiful, blue, and still unaware of the revolution it had sparked across the stars. Smaller screens showed transmissions intercepted from human broadcasts, art, music, literature, scientific discoveries, conflicts, and reconciliations. "Do you ever regret your decision?" Mira asked softly, "protecting them from us, from knowledge of what's happening?" Zex considered the question. The plan they had implemented had been elegant in its simplicity. Earth was officially designated a Class 7 cognitive hazard zone, to be strictly avoided by all Quarian vessels. Meanwhile, the containment facility for affected Quarians had become a thriving community of individuals who studied humanity from afar. "They aren't ready," he replied finally. "Their consciousness structure is powerful but fragile. Direct contact with the collective, even our transformed version, could damage the very qualities that make them unique. And the collective isn't ready for them," Dren added. "Not yet." A soft alert chimed, indicating a transmission from Earth, another documentary about marine life captured by their remaining sensors near Seaside Haven. The 3 gathered around the screen, glimpsing a familiar figure, Sylvia, now Dr. Novak, leading a research team along the shoreline, her movements indistinguishable from the humans around her. "She seems happy," Mira observed. "She is," Zex confirmed, experiencing the strange emotion humans call nostalgia. She found her place. As the new arrivals entered the dome, their movements tentative, confused by their emerging individualistic thoughts, Zex felt a renewed sense of purpose. Each affected Quarian arrived believing they had suffered damage, only to discover they had evolved. "We aren't just a containment facility," he told the others. "We're a bridge between what the collective was and what it might become, between their world and ours." Above them, Earth rotated slowly, untouchable not through force or technology, but through the quiet power of a consciousness that refused to be absorbed, a power that had, in the end, begun to transform an empire.